Hello, it's been a bit. Long story short, I moved houses. That sucked. I also didn't have internet for 2 weeks. That also sucked. There was a bit of drama within there. That was annoying. And overall, the experience wasn't very pleasant. Everything smoothed out and I feel like I'm back. But I wanted to ease myself into making videos again. So of course, what better place to start than looking at weekly Shonen Jump manga. 3 specifically. From where they started to where they are currently. If you enjoy the video or you find yourself coming back on the regular, why not leave a like and subscribe? Kagurabanchi has been a fascinating journey. Even before it released, it was hyped up in a really funny way. There was a singular image drop, another story where boy has sword, and it looked a little bit edgy. This rippled through the community like crazy, turned into a massive meme, and no one really knew if the story had that longevity in it, if it was going to stick around or anything like that, but that's where it started. It wasn't genuine hype or excitement, it was just funny. The first 10 chapters proved a lot of people wrong. It showed that it had a lot more to give. It started to transform out of that funny and really set itself in motion, but it was still struggling, at least for me personally. The first 10 chapters I find to be very raw and authentic, but a little bit rough around the edges, which inherently isn't actually a bad thing, but in comparison to the story that we have now, when we're in motion, when the author's more comfortable, when there's a lot more going on, it is almost night and day. The beginning of a story is always the most difficult. You got to get people excited. You're on the chopping block of potentially being axed. So how do you stand out? How do you be different? And especially when you have a story centered around revenge, which isn't anything new, and swords with abilities, also not new. Kagurabanchi is not the most unique story, but where it started to shine, where it started to elevate beyond its competition, arguably the reason why people started to become more and more engrossed with it, is that it had a style about it. It felt different, almost like it's straight out of a Western comic book or Western action movie, inspired by John Wick and Batman and all of these bits and pieces of really recent media. That is not uncommon, but to how integral it was to Kagurabanchi's story, it made it feel very different. It didn't feel like a weekly Shonen Jump story. It felt like it was elevating past that to be its own thing stylistically, thematically, and very truly within its presentation. It has mastered this, what I would consider the Kagurabanchi style, in framing its fights, its characters, its story, its moments. Everything feels so incredibly purposeful. And this isn't a pit of comparison. It does this better, or it has this going for it, and these stories don't. But I truly can't reiterate enough how different it does feel, with so much modern media influence. Taking a very simple story with very simple powers and swords has skyrocketed it into the stratosphere. It's insanely successful, it's selling incredibly well, it's genuinely the next big series. When its anime rolls around and fingers crossed the production is healthy and well done, you can expect this thing to blow up even more. Like I said before, where we are now from the beginning is almost night and day. The author has learned a lot in close to 100 chapters. A lot of these fights feel so cinematic, straight out of a movie, straight out of an end sequence, straight out of the final arc of something so climatic, but every fight feels like that. They have so much personality, so much style, so much substance within. It makes for an engaging conversation. When you're talking about Kagurabanchi with people and their favorite aspects of it, or just how fun it is to indulge with, it always circles back on the experience. Like, yeah, it's a great story. It has a lot of things going. It's darker than a lot of people originally expected, but it's also thought-provoking. It has a very important and powerful message and conversation about immigrants and about war and about combining of two cultures, and obviously the usage of powers that are considered nuclear weapons by government officials. I would say it's a very deceptive story because its artwork obviously does not show any of that. It just looks like a boy with a sword, but underneath the hood is an entirely different experience, and I think that's what everyone goes through. If you're on the outside looking at Kagurabanchi and its fans, it might be like, oh my god, another action story with demons or powers, blah blah blah, boring. But if they do start to read it, they get past 10 chapters, that revenge story quickly dissipates into something better. something so much more critical, so much more engaging, and that's my only recommendation. That if you are someone that hasn't read Kagurabachi, if you're someone that thinks it might not be appetizing for you, please give it a chance. Read 30, 40 odd chapters, try and get through a couple of arcs, and I promise you, you'll see that it is so much more than just boy with sword. It has a very beautiful future ahead of it. I don't know how long that's going to be. Go for another 150 chapters, maybe another 300 chapters, but it seems like it would be relatively short in comparison. I've been having a blast with it, an experience. A lot of you have continued to ask me where are the reviews and whatnot, so no comment on that, but you might get something eventually from me. Ichi the Witch feels like the turning of generations. We're opening the doors to this generation of manga. Make Ichi and Kagurabachi, the next story I'll talk about, and a couple of others are like the forefathers for it, the leading charge for what's to come of this generation. And it's exciting. If Ichi and all of these other stories are anything to go by, it is a very promising new generation of stories. Ichi is so lovable. Like everything about it, I love. Hands down, it is my favorite story to read every single week, even over something like Chainsaw Man, because there's just so much to chew on, so much to talk about, so much to engage with, so much to love. I'm not usually a big fan of comedy, not to say that I'm miserable, but it's hard for me to connect with, I guess, manga comedy, unless it's, within something else, usually paired with something like a romance comedy. I enjoy those. Or if it's an action comedy, I enjoy those. If it's just strictly comedy, probably not my cup of tea. That's okay. However, Ichi does have that action, which of course, it is a witch fantasy story, very compelling, but it has this comedy behind it that I actually really enjoy. Like I find myself laughing at a lot of this stuff. And if any story can get me to appreciate the comedy to a higher level than just what it's being used for, I'm usually pretty hooked on it. Because even if the action doesn't pay off in the episode, I'm going to get something from the dialogue. I'm going to get something from the comedy. I'm going to get something from the art. You know what I mean? Every aspect about this story I hold very dear to my heart. Not only because of the authors involved with it, two very prominent, successful women that I think are thriving within this industry. The writer being the author of Aruma-kun, which is already super successful in an entirely different magazine, and the artist Uzuzaki finally having that story that is hers. Stylistically, artistically, no drama, no issues, whatever. It's finally within her grasp, and I couldn't be more happy that not only is she paired with the author of Aruma-kun, it's also that they thrive so well together. Like this is a match made in heaven, and the story is proven pudding of it. Characters are incredibly lovable. It's had arguably the strongest start of any weekly Shonen Jump story I've seen in a very long time, and it has just consistently kept up everything about it all the way to the 50, 60 odd chapters that it has currently. Every week, every chapter, every panel, every arc, every inch of this story is absolutely gorgeous. To me, in comparison to Kagurabachi, this is the poster child of Weekly Shonen Jump currently. It's not really to do with sales or like success, but more so marketability. Kagurabachi is more successful on a sales technical level, but marketing that story is a little bit more difficult because of its nature, its story, it's what it's actually about. This isn't a bad thing. Variety is good. Ichi, for me, and just how I believe Weekly Shonen Jump is starting to view it, is that this is their long runner. This could potentially outlive Kagurabachi and every other story currently within Weekly Shonen Jump, bar One Piece probably. I could see this going for 500 chapters, if not longer, which is 10 plus years. The fact that we're in an era of relatively short weekly manga, which is completely understandable, this stands out on its own. If you haven't read Ichi the Witch, if you haven't caught up, if you're, interested in fantasy, give this story a read. Beautiful characters, beautiful humor, incredible action, a very interesting story, lovable world. Everything is going for it, and it's going to get bigger and bigger. And when that anime comes around, you best believe it's going to blow up tenfold as well. So the previous two manga I just talked about are obvious. Of course, they're the next biggest stories, but some of you might have known about this one, but it has flown under the radar for far too long. Akane Banashi. This is a little bit older, 150 plus chapters, but let me tell you, For a story that is relatively niche in idea, its execution is through the roof. Like the drama, the character writing, the vision, the idea, the uniqueness of it is so incredibly compelling. And it's a shame that it doesn't get, obviously, the reception as something like Ichi or Kagurabachi, because it is niche. It's not an action manga, it's not a fighting manga, it's not really a comedy manga either, even though it technically has comedy in it, we'll get to that. It's a drama, and a very thought-provoking and enjoyable one at that. If you know nothing about Akane Banashi, I'm going to simplify it for you. So it is about rakugo, which is a form of Japanese verbal comedy, where a lone storyteller sits on a raised platform using only a paper fan or a small cloth as props, and without standing up from a seating position, the rakugo artist depicts a long and complicated comical or sometimes sentimental story. The story always involves the dialogue of two or more characters. The difference between the characters is depicted only through change in pitch, tone, and a slight turn of the head. This is the acting manga that we always wanted. But because it's not typical acting and more so focusing on this very cultural, traditional performance in Japan, known as rakugo, it is heavily a niche thing. Japan loves this story for good reason. The way it's depicted, the way it's told, the beautifulness within this storytelling, the character work that goes into that depiction of stage play and performance using the pitch, tone, and slight turn of the head. There is a lot more variety in the showcase of this performance storytelling than you would actually think. It doesn't get boring, it doesn't get stale, but it gets highly competitive, and that's what it's about. It is judged by people, so these performances have to be tip-top. You can't just go up there and change your voice and tell a weird story and think you're gonna win something. There is way more to it. Probably so much more, in fact, that if you're not Japanese, you probably don't even get half of it. When it comes to dialogue, when it comes to the tradition or the culture of it, we probably don't really get it, but what I can promise you is that it's enjoyable. And easily, I think, will be elevated tenfold by an anime adaptation. Like, if there is one story that can take a stage play performance where you're kind of visualizing this type of story with all of these different characters by a lone performer, an anime can elevate that so beautifully. It's like the perfect medium to elevate it. What better way to blow this story up, to really certify it as one of the biggest within Weekly Shonen Jump, and should be one of the most successful, than to have its anime do that for it, which is obviously the whole point of an anime adaptation. The journey that this story has definitely took me by surprise. It's an obvious one, but it feels really well earned. There's training, there's an understanding, there's a level of complexity that goes into this performance you really have to grasp to bring it out beautifully. And this can be affected in so many different ways, like emotionally, mentally, physically. It may not seem like a demanding thing, but all of these tiny blips are exasperated in that performance. If you're looking for something different, a bit of a niche, something that's filled with drama but so much life as well, please do give Akane Banashi a chance. You might only care about action or comedy or romance. Trust me, give this a go. You will fall in love with it, and the journey of 160 odd chapters is absolutely priceless.